All right, thank you, folks, for joining us for our honors colloquium here on Friday morning. We are very happy to be welcoming a repeat presenter. Dr. Farraj has presented to the honors colloquium a few times, I think, at this point. Dr. Farraj is an associate professor of electrical engineering, is that right? Down at our RELLIS campus, as also the coordinator for our RELLIS program. And today he's going to be talking to us on understanding supply chain security in critical infrastructure. So I will turn it over to Dr. Farraj, and we should have some time for questions at the end. So take it away, sir. Thank you. I will also
Yeah,
man the Zoom to let people in as needed.
sure. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good day. And yeah, I'm happy to be here to talk about, like having like just a bit of understanding how cybersecurity works for supply chain, specifically for critical infrastructure. So I teach at the RELIS campus, and we have an electrical engineering program. Hopefully, we'll start in computer engineering soon. And we're actually starting a supply chain program there. So, this is like kind of interconnected of what we do and relates to our future expansion at the Relis campus. So here's like all right. So everybody almost everybody has a phone right now, except maybe my kids. But think about like okay, your phone. If you happen to open, the case and the cover and look inside, where do these components come from? You think of like hundreds, maybe thousands of components. Where do they come from? So the thing is, like the sourcing for those components in general, it comes from like so many different places. It's more like a global supply. So many components come from diverse suppliers worldwide, and that opens a potential for risks. Like potential risks here, it could come, for example, counterfeit parts, malware, sabotage, and many, many other things. And I can tell you many stories. I know we don't have time to these things, but I can tell you many stories about like the sabotage we see in the market when it comes to supply chain. So cybersecurity is one of the elements, one of the tools we should implement and enhance in order to safeguard against these risks and keep and maintain the supply chain functioning and doing its job. So you could think of the supply chain as like many, like more like a Jenga tower, if that's like a proper analogy. So what happens when one of the Jenga blocks is compromised? You know, the tower, Jenga tower, becomes very shaky. It could collapse quickly. So you could think of any like the security of the system boils down to the security of its weakest link. The weakest link in the infrastructure kind of quantifies the security of the whole system. So the weakest link anywhere in this supply chain can cause like a collapse in the system. It could lead to ripple effects, meaning we have multiple parties that are we are sourcing to build this phone. But if one component could be compromised, this could compromise the end product, and that makes us aware of how do we approach this in general, like what is it that we need to do to look at cybersecurity for this complex system. So before I talk about these things, the talk is about uh, cybersecurity, um, supply chain, and critical infrastructure. So I think it's good just to have a baseline. What is critical infrastructure? What's supply chain? And what's cybersecurity? So critical infrastructure, you could think of it as like the systems and assets that are essential for the functioning of a nation or a region. For example, energy, transportation, water, telecom, healthcare, financial services, and the government. And the characteristics of these systems are, you know, they're vital to the economy, the public health, and national security. They are very interdependent. Disruption in one sector could lead to issues in other sectors. These systems are not just owned by one entity. these are owned by different parties. Some of them are privately owned, some of them publicly owned, and there's some level of government intervention oversight. Okay, what is cybersecurity here that we talk about? Cybersecurity, you could define it as the technologies, processes, and practices that are designed to protect computer systems from, theft, damage, disruption, or unauthorized access. And when we talk about cybersecurity, it's kind of like the landscape of cybersecurity is very, very dynamic. So, like many years ago, people thought about cybersecurity like reacting to viruses and stuff, but now it's very like we have to deal with very sophisticated cyber attacks, and some of them like state actors, some of them like have political agenda, or some of them just hacktivists, and that. So you have to deal with all of that. In general, cybersecurity try to protect the CIA triad, which is the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information. So confidentiality, you protect the information from disclosure to unauthorized parties. Integrity, you maintain the information being not modified by somebody who is not authorized. And availability, you make sure the data or a system is available to when is needed. All right. What is supply chain? So you could think supply chain network of organizations, people, activities, information, and resources that are involved in producing and delivering a product or a service from the supplier all the way to the end customer. So supply chains are in general, they are very integrated. So you need coordination between the different players, between suppliers, manufacturers, and all the way to consumers. There's like a flow of goods from the suppliers all the way to the finished products. And supply of goods, not necessarily, you think of supply chain as, the phone, as actually it's more than that. It's movement of raw material, work in process, and inventory, and till the finished product. And there is a flow of information as well. So you have communication between the different stakeholders. The supply chain creates value. So you have raw material, then you at the end you end up with a finalized product, and there's a value produced along the way. And supply chain is very dynamic, meaning it adapts to demand, technologies, and global trends. And why is it important? Why do we need to care about supply chain? Because it ensures the availability of goods and services. It reduces costs and improves efficiency. It enhances customer satisfaction and experience. It supports goals like national goals, sustainability goals, or financial goals of organizations. For example, now people are like, if you pay attention to the news about tariffs and stuff, um, like why car manufacturing happens between across the border, because companies realized that they could, like many years ago, they realized that they could improve efficiency and reduce costs by like integrating the supply chain between, let's say, Canada and the United States. So there was reasons for this integrated supply chain, and some of these reasons economical, some of them to diversify the supply chain actors. So that's why it's very intertwined and integrated. Okay, so what are the key elements in a supply chain? You have the suppliers, they provide raw material, compute components, or specialized equipment. You have the manufacturers who will process the raw material or assemble finished goods. You have distributors who transport and store goods, ensure delivery. You have retailers who sell goods to consumers or the other businesses. You have the consumers who buy the phones or product services. You have the logistic people, so they manage transportation, warehousing, and inventory. You have information systems, so they facilitate the communication and the flow of information between the different parties in the supply chain, and they help manage the supply chain in general. Okay, why supply chain security is important? Why what's so special about supply chain and security? Because of the interdependence, critical infrastructure relies on very complex network of suppliers and other key players. So that means it's really hard to put your hands on the problem in general. Like it's very complicated. Also, the supply chain is very vulnerable, so disruptions could have very like cascading effects, and it could affect different and multiple sectors. Also, attacks on supply chain could compromise the availability, integrity, and confidentiality of the goods or services. So, I mean, if you think of a phone, maybe okay, like the phone does not work because of this attack. But if you think of food, somebody contaminated the food, that's an attack, and that could lead to a health issue. So, consequences of supply chain security issues, economical, for example, service outage, delays, increased cost, and loss of revenue. You have social, you could look at like disruption in services like electricity, water, and transportation. National security, for example, you could have issues with sourcing components that you need to put in airplanes or your defense systems. Public health disruptions could affect the healthcare and prevent the delivery of essential medical services. What type of threats affect supply chain? We could look at them: cybersecurity, cyber threats, and physical threats. There's a human factor in between. So cyber threats include, for example, data breaches. Somebody gets access to sensitive data, and malware attacks. Somebody like puts like installs like a malware on like a software to prevent the operation or steal data, or have like ransomware attack. You have denial of service attack that makes your system not functioning or not responding. Also, supply chain intrusions, you compromise hardware or software that make affect the supply chain. I'll give an example here. Let's say there is like a competition, or yeah, so two factories trying to compete, and one of them is unethical, and they come up they could, let's say the factories they're working on like some like A's, like they could compromise the HVAC system of the computer, basically affect the temperature, as simple as that. And this temperature, it could make the food go bad quickly, or could do so many different things to the computer. So well, as simple as that, you could ruin your computer. Similarly, there are like physical security threats, for example, theft. While moving things in a warehouse, somebody removes goods or materials. Sabotage of the transported material, so or the factory settings. Natural disasters, it's a threat. So you have earthquakes, floods, hurricanes, and tornadoes, and all of these things. It affects the supply chain. Terrorism, like after some groups might say, well, if we blow up this bridge, the flow of goods is going to stop. So between the cyber and physical, the human element is always there. So you could have insider threats. So somebody who's not happy, or somebody is just have malicious intents, they could compromise the system. Also, so it could happen because of lack of awareness or poor training. Like previous life, I worked in different companies. We were run like a cybersecurity training and campaigns, and they will send like emails to and see if people click on links, and then educate them. Yeah, you should not have done that. Or if you report them, they were like, if the employees report if like a phishing incident, they would reward them by tell them, oh yeah, you did a good job. And this, so you need training, you need increased awareness, and you need to worry about threats that could come from inside. So what could happen if there is a disruption to supply chain? Uh, I talked about this before. So, like, you could have increased cost for businesses or consumers, loss of productivity, job losses, and disruption to global trade. Social impacts, for example, shortage of goods, disruption to transportation and communication, public health crisis, and unrest. National security impact could weakening of your national resilience, threats to critical functions, and loss of strategic advantage. Okay, let's talk about how do I go around and try to enhance my cybersecurity. We could do a couple of things, for example, risk assessment. So we mentioned that it's very complex web of players. So you could start like risk assessment. So identify, evaluate potential vulnerabilities throughout the supply chain, and conduct threat modeling exercises. Basically, okay, what happens if this thing is compromised? Okay, what should we do? Right. So build that planning, build that planning into your culture. Put cybersecurity measures, for example, implement strong security controls, including firewalls, intrusion detection and prevention, encrypt your traffic. That's develop and enforce policies and procedures, and update your systems and train your employees. In a previous slide, when I talked about cybersecurity, I said it's technologies, it's the processes, and it's the people. So you have like it's three elements of cybersecurity. You have to work on the three of them. Technology by itself is not enough to get you a secure system. You need to develop like processes and policies. You need to train your employees. Uh, um, Enhance physical security, for example, you know, add physical security measures at facilities, for example, card to access the facility. Um, for example, check the logs of who enters, who leaves, check if the door is locked or not locked, these things. So develop um, access control and surveillance technologies. Also develop robust emergency response plans. uh, Diversify your supply chain. So reduce reliance on single suppliers or geographic locations, and develop alternative sourcing options. You think about it, now people talk about rare minerals, right? So where are they sourced? So like traditionally people go to China to get those rare minerals, but then, for example, recently they start putting export controls. So now, if this is your source, you're kind of almost stuck, right? So you need to diversify. You get those minerals, and it applies to other things as well. All right. There's a role for technology here. So, for example, you could use Internet of Things (IoTs) to track and monitor goods real time. So you have like a shipment coming from East Asia, and you could put some IoTs to monitor the temperature, and have some cameras, and they can monitor the shipment real time. Also, you could improve like the visibility and control throughout the supply chain by having those extra visibility points all over. You could use blockchain. So blockchain, people think of it like digital currencies, right? That's what people think of supply blockchain. But blockchain is more than that. So it's like more like a database, and database has element that cannot be altered without the consent of all parties in this, and it's distributed. So you could have like your contracts, basically, and transactions could be you could prevent messing up with those contracts by using blockchain. Of course, blockchain as a concept, that's good, but you need everybody in the supply chain to be subscribed to this blockchain technology, and all of you use the same technology and same database, so that all of those transactions are saved. Also, you could employ uh, AI and machine learning. AI is big now, and many people just use it, to chat and get ideas. But you could use it to, for example, detect anomalies and potential threats. So all of a sudden, you start to have traffic at night, or like, okay, Dr. Farraj all of a sudden logs into his machine at 4 a.m. And he doesn't do that often. So you start to detect those anomalies, and then that enables you to quickly detect if there's an intrusion and stop it. So it could also automate security tasks and improve decision making. Basically, there's like a lot, millions of logs that come to security analysts. It's overwhelming task, so you cannot really they cannot really handle all of them manually. So AI could help you automate all of that. There's a role for the government and standardization agencies. For example, here like some examples of you have the Cybersecurity Executive Order 14028, so which is improving the nation's cybersecurity. Also, there's the PBD 21, and it's around like critical infrastructure security and resilience. There's also like ISO, so it's a international. It provides international standards. So they have standard here, 2800 So it relates to, so as part of the supply chain, maybe I should look at these standards and implement the relevant ones to me. Also, the government not only has like regulations, they could help. For example, they could develop and enforce regulations, as just I mentioned, share threat intelligence and best practices, provide guidance, to assist critical infrastructure owners and operators. Remember, I said at the beginning, critical infrastructure is not owned by one entity and it could be privately owned. So you provide guidance to those people. um, I came across a standard, I think a European standard, I think, I'm not sure. And they were saying if you implement some of those security measures, we'll give you a preferential treatment, let's say at the port. You don't wait, like you don't go into the long queue. We have a special queue for you. If you put cybersecurity and you work with us, we treat you nicely. So that could motivate the supply chain players to adhere to those regulations. Also, there could be like collaboration and information sharing between the different players in this web. So sharing threat intelligence, best practices, public-private partnership to develop solutions and build trust and foster open communication channels. Now, just to be clear here, it's not really like as simple as that because remember, those players, some of them are competitors as well. So it's not as everybody should open up. People will not do that as easily because of this fear of competition. Okay, so what are some emerging trends that you see when it comes to supply chain and supply chain security? So supply chain 4.0, so 4.0. I use this title 4.0 because of the, you know, many times people think of industry 4.0 like the revolution and using digital assets and stuff. So maybe supply chain 4.0 is around that. So integration of advanced technologies and AI, IoT, blockchain into the management and security of the supply chain. Also, there are trends where people, looking for sustainability and environmental concerns. You know, people tell you like many, like you, there are like some movements where say, I need my genes to be sourced by, companies that respect human rights or, no like child labor and stuff. So these trends and movements sometimes push the supply chain to in different directions. Also, geopolitical risks. So you used to source your raw material from one place because of some issues or because of some, sustainability or human rights concerns. You have to move somewhere else. So you have to reset your cybersecurity practices and pay attention to the new players in this web. Also, you need to build resilience. It's not about just security. You need to build resilience. Basically, you need to rebound after a setback. That's what resilience is. So you need to develop and implement business continuity and disaster recovery. Sometimes, whatever you prepare, a disaster will happen. So what do you do when a disaster happens? You should be prepared. You should have a plan. You should have practiced the plan multiple times. You revisit the plan. Make sure like whom to call at what 12 a.m. when something happens. It should be documented, right? So you need to develop plans and business continuity and disaster recovery. You need to invest in infrastructure upgrades and modernization. For example, a couple of years ago, they were talking about, upgrading the bridges and rail and stuff, because that's where things move. Improve supply chain visibility and situation awareness. We're talking about using IoTs, to monitor and, having, cameras to monitor the warehouses and stuff. Building redundant systems and alternative supply chains. What if the supply chain I use to source my equipment, collapses? What do I do next? I have to develop plan B. Future of supply chain security. So the threats will continue evaluation, vulnerabilities will continue evaluation, and supply chain will continue to become more complex. So that puts pressure on the cybersecurity people for like to continuously adapt and innovate. And it becomes very important for the cybersecurity people to have proactive and collaborative approaches to handle this complex systems. Then it's important to build culture of security within organization. As I said, there are like cyber threats, physical threats, but the human element is part of both. So you have to create a culture where your employees are aware of cybersecurity issues and they're trained and they are able to uh, tell if this is spam, this is a campaign against the company, and that's it. It's important to develop like employee awareness and training, and make sure your staff is your first line of defense. I said beginning, cybersecurity, it has technologies, people, and um, procedures. You need to invest in the three of them. Technology by itself is not enough. Good employees without good technology is not enough. Good technology and trained employees without documented procedures and a standard that they follow is not gonna cut it. So you need to have the three legs of this tool to make sure everything works fine. All right, this is what I have for you guys, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Farraj. We'll give you virtual applause, I think. There is a button for that somewhere. I don't remember where. Oh, there it is. Yeah, I can make little applause appear. If you want to stop sharing your screen, we can go back
Sure.
to our chat. So there's the opportunity to ask questions. So if you have a question, basically go ahead and unmute and ask. I will give folks an opportunity before I ask mine. All right, I'll lead us off then. I'm not a cybersecurity person either. The period I studied, didn't have a lot of cybersecurity. Had a little bit of cryptography, but so when you're looking at this, do you envision most of the threats, I guess, coming from kind of independent actors or state-sponsored actors, or is it going to be dependent on what the target is, right? If it's the American Department of Defense, is that likelier to be a state-sponsored actor or not? And how is there a difference in how you prepare for it?
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting question. So keep in mind that we like this presentation is about critical infrastructure. So even if it's not like DoD, you still have to worry about it because it's your food, it's the healthcare and stuff. Now, who could be behind like threats? So the threats could be physical threats. I mean, a hurricane, right? Could be a threat, right? So and the climate, impact on the supply chain. It's there. Also, there are like actors that are interested in either sabotage or steal your secrets. So because remember, cybersecurity talks about we saw CIA triad:
Hmm.
confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So a confidentiality attack, somebody basically gets access to your data. And why would they do that in this context? Basically, let's say if I'm a factory, and I'm manufacturing something, you know. The secret is not really in the ins and the outs. Probably the secret here is the parameters of the machines. How much temperature, how much I mix things. So the adversary in this case is if somebody wanna either steal my recipe and then they will access, try to access the where I store the parameters, or they want to sabotage my production so that they gain an advantage on me. So that's the confidentiality part. The availability part is where um, you want the system to function, but it doesn't. So they prevent the system from responding to your requests. And here, for example, let's say you run a denial of service attack. So basically, you jam your servers. They jam your servers. Basically, the server is responding to bogus attacks and not able to respond to your legitimate attack, legitimate requests. And then finally, it's the attack on the integrity of the data. Basically, here they mess up your recipe, right? If you were to go back to the factory, they mess up your recipe. So instead of temperature like 52 degrees Fahrenheit, they make it 55 or like 54. Now, as a human, maybe you don't tell the difference. It still feels a bit chilly, like in the factory. But for the mixers and these things, these 2 degrees difference make your product to not last the way it should last, and that stuff. Now, when you talk about like who's behind all of these, so a factory is maybe a competitor or somebody who is like want to try to gain advantage when it comes to like the national security secrets or defenses. Now you think who got the benefit from this, right? Who got the benefit from my airplanes not functioning the way they are? Then that could tell you, okay, it could be either some activists that they have an issue with the way the government behaves and stuff, or a state-sponsored actors, and they are really very sophisticated. Those people, like the state actors, very sophisticated, and they have patience, they have resources, and they can. Like I remember the attack on Sony, if people still remember, the actors were there for months, really
Hmm.
months, like before they make anything, they have been in the infrastructure for months trying to navigate where to go. So those people have resources, they have time, they have like very skilled, you know, threat actors, and they can do a lot of damage. So you have to really um, up your defenses and be on the lookout of these things.
Very cool. Thank you, sir. Any other questions for Dr. Faraj?
Yeah, actually, I was just curious. So obviously there are particular protocols that are actually in place to ensure the integrity of our supply chain risk, as far as, any kind of um, um, hackers or anything like that. Do you happen to know, Dr. Faraj, what are some of the supply chain risk management protocols that we have in place to ensure that integrity?
Right. So when it comes to supply chain, traditionally people treat it as a cybersecurity problem. So they apply, for example, the ISO 28000, like a framework, which is a cybersecurity framework to the supply chain problem, right? So they treat this as if it is cybersecurity system, and I need to secure it. Of course, it's more than this. That's why I mentioned like there is like two directives from the government, PBD 21, and there's the other one. So those specifically address the cybersecurity of the critical infrastructures. So people could start there. There is a European standard, which I just forgot the name of it, that is currently in place. I mean, I can look that up for you. But yeah, there are like specific standards and protocols for securing the infrastructure and supply chain. But traditionally, people look at that problem from as if I'm trying to secure a computer system, which is not really adequate because you, with the complexity you deal with and with the uh, geographical locations of the supply chain, it's very becomes very complex. And since you, let's say you are one of the players, and I wanna, let's say you are Apple, and you wanna make sure your final product is good, is secure. You have to secure all of the elements of the supply chain, including the subcontractors that you might not even know about. So those guys, maybe like one of the contractors, one of the suppliers will subcontract with somebody else. You have to worry about that subcontractor. Remember the hack on Target? It was through a subcontract, like an HVAC subcontractor. Like who, like how, it's very elaborate scheme. So it could come from a weakest link, and that's why I mentioned you have to do threat modeling. So when you do the threat modeling, you have to account for all of those supply chain actors.
And so the federal department, the federal branch of our government that would be, I guess, responsible for that would be like what, Homeland Security?
Yes, there is a Homeland Security standard, I would say. There was a directive from, I think, from the Obama time, which is PBD 21, regarding that. Um, Remember, some of those assets are privately owned. So you really, it's like you can't force them to do that, but you can motivate them, right? That's why they're like information sharing. You can share with them how to do that, and when it comes, for example, to electricity, there is a NERC. So if you want to be a big player in the electricity market here in North America, you have to be NERC compliant. So, and that forces the big players, like the big generators, uh, to adhere to, let's say, minimum requirements required by NERC. And yeah, so some of that comes from the industry, some of it comes from the federal government, and some of it is just self-interest because if you want to get like ISO stamp, you need to like achieve the minimum, like the requirements of the ISO. And if the European Union says to export to us, you have to adhere to those, like let's say privacy requirements. If you want to go there, if you want to sell some stuff, you have to adhere to that. So the requirement come from different players. I would say it's not centralized.
So basically, it's kind of like a contractor when he's building a home and he has several other contractors that are delegated certain responsibilities and certain key roles and being able to be able to ensure the integrity of that home, essentially.
Yes. So yeah, that's the point. That's the excellent point. And you could think of it as you have a job, and if you are an employee, you have to do, let's say, security background check, right? So that's a requirement for you as an employee. Now, if you want to outsource some of that job to a contractor, do you require the contractor to have security background as well? Also, if the contractor subcontracts somebody else, do you require them to do that? So you are secure as the weakest link in your infrastructure. That's why you need the contractor, the subcontractor, and anybody that comes after the subcontractor to adhere to the same requirements. And that, unfortunately, without visibility on the supply chain, you don't know, right? You don't know who your vendor is, like you're collecting their material from, or who's the trucker, who's the trucking company that is transporting the goods from point A to point B, as a maybe uh, as a final player in the supply chain. You don't have visibility on all of these things, but you should, and that's why this is really a very sophisticated and complicated topic.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Definitely, yeah, sure.
Okay. Any other questions for Dr. Faraj? Okay, in that case, I will say thank you once again, and you get another little applause. If you do have additional questions for Dr. Faraj, I'm sure he'd be more than happy to have you reach out via
Definitely.
email. just on the directory. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. I'll get this posted to YouTube, and others can enjoy it as well. But
Definitely. Thank you for having me.